Hello and welcome to week 5. Lessons and lecture right here. Real briefly, I'm going to click on this link and take us to this right here. Talk about the summaries of the survey we all took. And then I'll let you look through this on your own. You probably will get to this link and it'll look like this. You need to go to Form, Show Summary of Responses, and it should look like this. You can look at this yourself and come to your own conclusions about, as a whole, how the class feels, where the center of gravity is for the class. Do not feel that you need to write a paper that pleases the rest of the class at all. I want individual ideas. It is good to know your audience, and we are going to share, and there's going to be an opportunity for peer response and peer reading. I want to talk a little bit about the questions in the survey, because normally I have a class discussion, but we don't. Class discussion is kind of a different idea. 68% of us do not speak any language other than English, but 32% of us speak another language well enough to can actually use it in our daily life. 32%. That would be shocking to the people who record information about our school. Typically, people would be surprised to find out we have more than 10 to 15%. 2. When we see grammar mistakes in people's writing, it's better to do nothing than to say something that might be wrong. Basically, I'm testing this question, how shy we are, how politically correct. What I'm seeing by this, the tendency in our class to lean towards disagree that we are not politically correct as a group, and I think that's good. My attitude as a teacher and as a thinker, I like to ask questions. I like to engage in dialogue, and I don't like the idea that you lose friends over expressing ideas that may not be compatible. I feel like that's sort of one of the negative things that's come out of the Facebook generation, and it's just not Facebook. We have found a way now to choose our news sources, and we only listen. The people on the right listen to right-wing sources. People on the left listen to left-wing sources, and we are sheltered from opinions that differ from our own, and that's not a good thing. I think we need to engage more, and we need to risk offending each other. But I hope that in our class, if we do say things that are stupid or offensive, I hope they are unintentionally offensive. I want to be respectful in our language. I want to avoid labels. But And people are really sensitive about their language, and that's something to be careful about. But I do want to ask questions. An example, I had a friend in Taiwan who was, her significant other was Taiwanese, and he used to use this expression I just loved. He used to say it, he ran a bar, and I'll make comments later on about the mafia and how, I don't want to talk about how I know about the mafia, but he used to use this expression when it was time to kick people out of his bar at night. He used to say, time to gotta go. Time to go, gotta go. He mashed them together and create this verbal linguistic mashup. The guy spoke at least 3 languages fluently. And his English was perfect. I mean, he could speak. But my friend and I we picked up that phrase, time to gotta go. We both really liked it. It was creative. It was vibrant. It was alive. It was effective. It was fun. But when he heard us using it, he realized that we picked it up from him and he stopped using it. I've had students ask me to correct every mistake they make in grammar, and I tried that my first year teaching, and I discovered that by correcting every mistake someone made, I essentially silenced that student. They stopped speaking so that they would stop making mistakes, because people are naturally afraid to make mistakes. We have to find a balance. We have to walk a fine line here. But I hope that we can establish relationships early on in the semester so that we feel comfortable talking about our language and the way we use language and our beliefs about language without offending ourselves or anyone else. Third question, America should adopt the metric system. I'm surprised how many people said agree. But it's cool. You know, I don't like this dividing people into right versus left, conservative versus liberal. First of all, I find that the labels are meaningless anymore. Socialist tends to mean somebody we don't like, just as fascist seems to mean somebody we don't like. But as political ideology, those terms mean nothing anymore other than labels. I like this. If you believe that standards are a good thing and that uniformity in communication is necessary for progress, you should love the metric system. Problem is, a lot of people that say we should be English only also say we should reject the metric system, which is, in my opinion, fundamentally, philosophically inconsistent. Next question. Teachers are likely to see intentionally racist attitudes or language in student papers. And I guess that should say student readers as well are likely to see intentionally racist or language in student papers. Only 2% said yeah, but 30% almost said no opinion, which I almost wish I'd have taken that out of there. It's kind of a cop-out. Most of the class says no, you're not going to see that. I'm curious, that 2% that said yeah, you're probably going to see it, I wonder if they're people of color. I asked that question because at KU, we really care. When I was there, we really seemed, the prevailing opinion seemed to be that it was an issue. And KU is very liberal, it's very progressive. Interestingly enough, though, KU has the second to whitest student body of any of the Big 12 schools. K-State is ironically more ethnically diverse than KU. Johnson County Community College is much more conservative politically than KU. When it comes to students' rights, though, this students' rights question, this paper that we're doing in the class, is actually the question I did the first time it was part of my lesson plan the first time I applied for a job at JCCC. And my teaching demo kind of ended up in just damn near a fist fight. Well, it's a slight exaggeration, but it's split. At KU, everybody supports the student rights, though, to be honest, I don't think too many people live by it. At Johnson County, it's split. Faculty are split, and I think that's a great thing, though I may have talked about that earlier. There's nothing grammatically wrong. I'm looking now at the next one with the modifier, in order of modifiers and expression, the red little wagon. At KU, in a graduate level grammar class, seminar, graduate level, I was taught, no, there's nothing wrong with it. If you want to say that, you could. However, teaching English as a foreign language overseas, I found out that no, there is a problem with that. It violates reader expectations. Every native English-speaking reader would see something wrong with the red little wagon. There's actually a grammatical rule called the Royal Order of Adjectives that says size goes before color. So there is something wrong with it. It violates listener-reader expectations, and it will mark you if you use it as a non-native speaker or someone who speaks. It's understandable, but it marks you. And so I think it's worth talking about if you see something like that in someone's paper. Do you want to be seen? Do you want people judging you? Do you want people marking you as a non-native speaker? Or do you want people to focus on ideas? If you were grading or reviewing a student paper for a class other than this Comp 2 class and you saw Black English Vernacular, would you draw attention to it or advise the student to use mainstream U.S. English, which I prefer that to standard English. I don't like that term as well because it's not really standard. We don't have an official language in this country, but we do have a mainstream U.S. English. We do have the language most people speak in public, on TV, and in academic settings. We are almost evenly divided, which I find very interesting. By the way, on the students' right paper, I've written it twice, and it depends where I am and who I'm with. I've written both sides of this argument, so it really depends on, am I talking, who is my audience, who is my imagined student. So when you write this paper, make sure you focus and communicate in your first paragraph. Who is your imagined audience and who is your imagined, are you talking about college students? You should be focusing on college students. Are you talking about native speakers, non-native speakers, students of color? And if so, what color? Because it makes a difference. Now, question, if students adopt Muse, they risk losing their language of nurture. I think most people disagree. I'm curious, these two people who don't disagree, who agree they do risk losing their language of nurture, I wonder if they're non-native speakers or speakers of a dialect. This is a good time to introduce the concept of code switching, C-O-D-E, S-W-I-T-C-H-I-N-G. Clinton, Martin Luther King Jr., Jesse Jackson, they all can switch between standard English and Black English Vernacular, and they can work a crowd by using the right dialect. People from the South can switch into Southern dialect. People who speak Spanish can speak Spanish and English at different times. And to what extent do people risk losing their identity or their or their language. The last question I find interesting: should you be able to tell if someone's been to college by the way they speak? This used to be the case. You used to know if someone went to college by the way they spoke. They spoke proper, which is a terrible way to express that. Because proper is a circular argument. It's proper because it's right. It's right because it's proper. Well, it's correct. Well, those all mean the same thing. You have to understand that you speak a standard dialect or a dialect that's not privileged. Should you be able to tell if someone's been to college? Should college graduates speak, or maybe should they write differently? I don't believe in class distinctions, but classes do exist, don't they? What's the reality? I think it's a real question about the idea of what is ideal versus what is actual. What is, in theory versus practice. In theory, according to Homer Simpson, in theory, communism works. But in practice, no, it certainly does not. Now, these last questions, you can go through and read what your classmates said. I think that is different. What's in the best interest of society in general is different from what's in the best interest of non-native speakers, which is different from the best interest of people who speak Black English vernacular, which is different from what's in the best interest of white students who already speak Muse at home. And guess what? If you already speak white Muse at home, there is no advantage to learning white Muse at school. We're just teaching you to proofread. That's it. But if you speak white Muse at home, learning about other dialects that potential customers, potential employers might speak is to your advantage. If you're a non-native speaker, there's a real advantage to focusing on one dialect of English because there's so many to choose from, it gets confusing. Almost every non-native speaker I've ever had has said, I want one mainstream US English, don't teach any dialect other than that. If you are from other dialects, Black English vernacular, for example, it depends. And there's real good reasons for either argument. And I don't care what you choose. I want to know what your arguments are. The last thing I'll comment on, what's the difference between a language and a dialect? I love your answers, all of them. Don't agree with all of them, but let me tell you this. No, the real answer to this question, and I'll let you go, the difference between a language and a dialect, an army and a navy. In Sweden, a Swede can talk to a Finn from Finland, each speaking their own language, and yet they can communicate and understand completely. A Mexican can speak with an Italian, and after about 15-20 minutes of difficulty, they can start communicating no problem. The Mexican speaking Spanish, the Italian speaking Italian. Two people from China who speak different dialects cannot communicate unless they write it down. And then they're using a different form of the language. They're using a written form. There, though, they're part of the same political group. All right? The difference between a language and a dialect is political. Language is political. And I got to tell you about shibboleth sometime soon. But we're out of time.